Today, we'll take a look at 10 JRPGs that are surprisingly good. Games that by the looks of them I thought will be dumb, generic, boring, or the usual not for me, right? But when I played them, man, I certainly got a very pleasant surprise. So let's begin. Number 10, Cross Tales. Chemco RPGs. Aren't most of them generic and subpar? Well, every now and then, a little gem stands out, and Cross Tales is definitely one of those. Developed by Ridion, most notably known for the Mercenary Saga series, this is a strategy RPG. You choose between two main characters, each with a different story arc. It's a world in the middle of a war between anthropomorphic creatures, and it's a grid-based strategy RPG with classic menus, stats, and abilities for the characters. The graphics are kind of unique as well, as you can see, and look really interesting in contrast of the backgrounds, but the art style for the characters is catchy enough to make the characters look appealing. It's a simple game with simple battle mechanics and gameplay mechanics, nothing out of the ordinary, but that's also what makes it special. Honestly, the game's no masterpiece, but it's impressive to see how some little studios, being published by Chemco of all things, have been getting better over the years. This game's available on every modern platform out there, and for a decent price, it's definitely worth checking out. Number 9, Scars of Mars. This highly unusual game will throw you off track right from the start, like it did with me. I thought I wasn't going to like it, but I did. It's surprisingly good. But an even bigger surprise is that this was developed by Acquire, the same studio who did the Octopath Traveler games. It was released just a few weeks ago on Steam and Switch only, for now. At first, it will look like a generic but experimental Western RPG with impressive art style for the characters. As the commander, it's your job to explore unknown space and solve some bizarre mysteries occurring in certain areas. So you can recruit a bunch of nameless characters, each with their own initial job. You will be able to change their job once you get certain items that unlock them by utilizing points on this strange skill tree system. It's a very confusing game at the beginning, especially since the exploration is a bit of a roguelike. You will start every mission at the bottom of a map with multiple routes that lead to battles, items, or discoveries. Once you start a battle, this screen will show up. Large monsters will be in front of your 4 playable characters standing on a small grid-based layer. The combat is really intense and complex here because it's on real time, not on turns. You have to move each character around to avoid taking damage or to attack an enemy on real time. Remember Mega Man Battle Network? Well, it's kinda like that, but controlling multiple characters at the same time, not just one. To make matters even more stressful, you have a timer to complete, not just the battle, but the entire map. Like I said, it's a bit of a roguelike, so every time you die, or the timer runs out, you'll go back to base, but you will retain points and passive abilities learned, so you'll be stronger on your second attempt. Anyway, back to the combat, I ended up using the most powerful character I have to dodge and attack, while every now and then getting support from the others until they died. It's not the best strategy, I know, but it got me by until I started getting used to the controls. Once you start getting the gist of it, the game can become somewhat addicting to play. Check it out if you want something extremely unique and intense. Number 8, Destiny of an Emperor. I thought this game will be outdated, convoluted, and boring for many years. I knew it was influential, but still quite the obscure and very forgotten title. Well, several days ago, I finally gave it a chance, and it honestly surprised me. I thought it would be more of a Romance of the Three Kingdoms type of strategy game. I mean, can you blame me? Look at the cover! But it turned out to be a traditional style turn-based RPG with an interesting twist in battle. It's based on a manga, and well, yeah, it still follows the events of the classic Romance of the Three Kingdoms Chinese novel. Basically, your 3 protagonists form a rebel group to fight in the war. As they go along, you can talk to NPCs, and some of them will actually be characters you can recruit. So basically, you go out into the overworld from town to town until you liberate some of them or defeat the generals in enemy camps. Battles are played in turns, random encounters, with up to 4 of your leaders against a bunch of enemies in front of them. You can select everyone's action in a classic menu-based system, but you can also select a strategist so they can all follow a similar attacking pattern if you decide to do an all-out battle. In those, you won't have any control and will have to wait until all the enemies are defeated. It's a good and fast way to grind, but I wouldn't recommend using these for the bosses. And that's it, nothing convoluted, nothing complex, traditional style, and a surprisingly fun combat that was very creative for its time. Number 7, Light Crusader. Generic name, generic cover, generic graphics, ugly art style, it looks bad. No, it's not a Western RPG, it's a JRPG developed by legendary company Treasure. And yes, it's also surprisingly good. Townspeople have been vanishing, so Sir David is sent to investigate by the king himself. Not much storytelling in this game, it's more about the gameplay. An action RPG where you'll be sent to deal with monsters in an isometric view with very basic controls. Combat is fine though. Most of the time you'll have to solve puzzles like going to this area to find a key that unlocks that other area that was locked. The layouts and the in-game graphics are interesting and there's some dark fantasy touch to it that I dig. I also like how most of the boss fights are basically puzzles themselves with a very specific way to defeat them. It's honestly more creative than I gave it credit for at first. That's why I included this game in this video, because it's simple, fun, and somewhat addictive and immersive when normally you wouldn't think twice of skipping it. It's on the Genesis, sure, but also available in almost every single Sega Genesis collections out there across multiple platforms. Number 6, Battle Princess of Arcadius. This game totally looks like a generic dumb and silly Odin Sphere ripoff, but it's not. I can't believe it turned out to be such a creative and engaging little 15-hour long game. Yes, it's a comedy about Princess Bloom being tasked by a king that's been turned into a dog to fight off the demons, but also to fight in a war. So despite being funny and quite colorful, especially in the graphics, it can take itself seriously at times. 3 battle modes exist here, all in 2D with hack and slash combat, but only 3 characters can be controlled per mission. In some, you'll fight a few enemies with decent controls, being able to switch between your 3 allies at any time. In others, you'll fight hordes of enemy soldiers, but can execute raids that are basically a massive area of effect attack, done by your many units, not your characters. And finally, the boss fights, where you gotta break their shields temporarily to do more damage, also fighting alongside your soldier units. You can give them passive and active commands if you want to. So yeah, you see, it's not your generic 2D action Odin Sphere clone, is it? It's way more than that. The game's a digital exclusive on the PS3 though, for now. Number 5, the Rhapsody Trilogy. Most people wouldn't believe these 3 games are good because they look silly, girly, and comedic. And yes, they are, but the humor is great, the puns are funny, and the characters are very charming. And the music, man, oh my god. Plus, the gameplay on each is quite traditional, full of beautiful pixel art and gorgeous graphics. Also, the first 2 are quite easy, with a fast interface and simple mechanics in both the exploration and the battle mechanics. The first game looks like a strategy RPG, but it isn't. It's just turn-based combat with characters moving on a few grids here and there. The second one is more classic turn-based as you know it, only some of the main characters can summon creatures though. The third game follows some episodes never seen before in the first 2 games, and then a main and final one with new protagonists. In that game you can have a crap ton of party members, both human and creatures, but you can only give orders to 4 of them, who will act as the leader of each group. This third game is somewhat unbalanced and quite challenging, but in some areas it's the best out of the 3. Like in storytelling for example, the main and the final chapter takes itself a bit too seriously than the previous games. The first 2 were originally released on PS1, while the third one stayed on PS2. Nowadays, the first one is available on PS1, Switch and Windows. It also got a remake on the Nintendo DS many years ago. 2 and 3 are found together on Switch, Windows, PS4 and PS5. I can't believe I'm a fan of these dumbass games, man. But like I said, they're all surprisingly good. Number 4, Okage Shadow King. look at this game. I mean, just look at this game. It looks stupid, to be honest, but also Tim Burton-ish, doesn't it? That's what might appeal to you at first. Another game with great humor here that can go cynical and dark at times. For starters, your silent protagonist is stuck with Stan, who claims himself the evil king, and together they go off on a quest to destroy the fake evil kings out there. Except Stan acts as his shadow and will do absolutely nothing else. Well, maybe except in battle he may randomly attack, but it's rare. This is a turn-based RPG where you have to select your action in real time, but once you bring up the menu, everything will freeze while you choose an attack, skill, item, etc. Yeah, just 3 characters in battle, each with different strengths and weaknesses, like your enemies as a matter of fact. No random encounters exist anywhere, instead monsters appear in the form of ghosts and it's kinda hard to avoid them once they notice you. Everything else is traditional, town to town, areas, dungeons, ruins, and the last 2 have a bunch of puzzles, so be prepared for that. This is a surprisingly good game despite looking low budget with deformed characters and a very strange vibe. It's on PS2, but also digitally enhanced on the PS4. Number 3, The Longest 5 Minutes. I can't believe this generic retro indie looking game turned out to be so much fun. I played the PS Vita version even though it's also on Switch and Steam. You control 4 friends who were tasked by the king to defeat the Demon Lord, and the game actually starts you in the fight against him. However, your protagonist doesn't remember anything, like how he got there and why he's fighting. His name is Flashback. That's right, because the game will be full of flashbacks where you're transported to several scenes and missions of the past, from when he set out into a random quest adventure to when he ended up fighting the Demon Lord. The graphics are reminiscent of the 8-bit era JRPGs, and the interface is quite similar to games like Earthbound and Dragon Warrior. The flashback missions will have you explore an overworld with some towns, dungeons, and ruins here and there. Battles are played in turns with a first-person view and the enemies in front of your characters. Menus are basic with regular attacks, magic spells, buffs, debuffs, items, etc. But the interface is so fast that it makes combat and grinding addicting, also because the game's kinda on the easy side, slowly getting challenging as you advance. Every time you beat a mission, you'll go back to the future, or present actually, and make decisions within the Demon Lord boss fight that will affect the outcome of the story. If you mess up, you can revisit a previous decision point and try something else to see if it works better. The music is absolutely fantastic here, with some pretty memorable themes. This is a game definitely worth checking out, despite being quite short and generic looking. Number 2, Sakuna of Rise and Ruin. Again, we meet a very silly looking game, and on top of it all, with some rice farming mechanics. Yep, I usually stay away from those. But I gave this one a chance because it was also a 2D action RPG. So you follow the adventures of a spoiled goddess princess that gets sent into a demon island with some humans as punishment for overlooking their entrance to heaven. Yeah, it's a comedy, but a really funny one, and Sakuna herself is a very likable character. So the entire game is based on 2 mechanics: going out to the overworld of the island, enter areas and fight through stages to defeat enemies, bosses, gather materials, and unlock new areas. Controls are weird at first, but fast-paced and responsive. It's basically a combat-driven game with Sakuna learning more abilities and moves as you progress, but you also have a sash you can use to climb up certain places or maneuver in battle. It's a challenging game, let me tell you that, and it'll take you a while to master Sakuna's controls. Anyway, materials are used to craft different weapons, armor, for food that you'll need to get better stats during battle, but also to use as fertilizer for the field where you'll grow the rice. Several gameplay mechanics are involved here, like planting seeds, cutting off bad weed, or prepare the rice once it's done. Believe it or not, this is how you level up, and the experience you get is based on how good the rice turns out to be at the end of each chapter. No, believe it or not also, there's nothing complex or convoluted about this game, which is why it's a really good game if you give it a chance. Steam, Switch, and PS4, and if you do, hopefully it will surprise you as much as it did to me. Number 1. Mato Anomalies. This game doesn't look bad at all. It's here because if you look it up online, you'll find nothing but mixed or negative comments about it. So as a result, I expected the absolute worst, only to receive a pleasant surprise when I finally played it. A neo-noir setting within a futuristic dystopia, one where you control two main characters. A private detective called Doe investigating some, well, anomalies between the real world and the dimensional layers out there. In those, you'll play as Graham, an exorcist that can fight the bizarre, virtual-looking creatures born out of negative human emotions in several dungeons that involve several puzzles. Anyway, he'll fight these creatures in a turn-based combat with up to 3 more allies, all sharing the same HP bar. Everyone has different abilities, of course, most of them with a cooldown by the way, and also have their own unique skill trees that you gradually unlock with points you get from leveling up. But yeah, the HP bar is treated as a team, making this an incredibly difficult game. And as though you'll go around the different districts of the city of Mato, talking to people, or engaging in these card turn-based battles. The game was heavily criticized because of this combat, but it was later patched to give the player the option to skip them after 3 attempts. I made a full review of this game that I'll leave at the end in case you want a deeper analysis of it. This actually isn't a Japanese RPG, but rather an indie RPG from Chinese studio Arrowwiz. But I still wanted to include it because it fit the title of this video so well. It's on every modern platform nowadays.